Today's show is brought to you by MongoDB. When you need to focus on building applications, do you want to get bogged down by your database? Definitely not. MongoDB is an intuitive, flexible document database that lets you get to building. MongoDB's document model is a natural way to represent data so you can focus on what matters. And MongoDB Atlas is the best way to use MongoDB. It's a global cloud database service that gives you all the developer productivity of MongoDB, plus the added simplicity of a fully managed database service. You can get started for free with MongoDB Atlas at mongodb.com/atlas. That's mongodb.com/atlas.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everyone is staying safe this week. As we publish this show, we've decided to do a kind of non-technical topic, if you will, and so stay tuned for that. But let's jump right into Cloud News of the Week. First of all, and probably one that has many of our listeners interested, and that is VMware vSphere 7 was released. Now, on this show, we probably haven't covered vSphere releases in quite a long time, but this one was interesting because this is the one with Project Tanzu and Project Pacific in it. So what exactly are those? So it's really this idea of bringing Kubernetes and Kubernetes runtime into the vSphere platform. And this is a long time coming. And something that has been a lot of folks in the industry have been really, really looking forward to. Initial feedback was it's probably a little complex and a little complicated, probably as you would expect in something trying to merge the two together. Like we would be in something like this. But really looking forward to this going forward, and I think it's going to be something a lot of the vSphere folks and VMware administrators and architects will be wanting to play with as soon as possible. Secondly, we have an acquisition. NPM Incorporated was purchased by GitHub. So if you're not familiar with NPM, the easiest way to think about it really is JavaScript software development and packaging to reduce the friction around that. And we put a link to the show notes about the acquisition and the blog in there. Really interesting to read the blog post, not just from a tech standpoint and GitHub with the acquisition and all the reasons behind that GitHub acquisition, but some thoughts from a founder. Thoughts from a startup of very small startup that grew into 0.3 million packages, 12 million developers, and downloading these packages 75 billion times a month. And so for that, we certainly wish them over their great success going forward. For our third article, we actually have an article that probably surprises no one, and that is IDC really starting to do their projections and what they call their black book forecast, and this idea of IT spending going down. And this was the initial adjustment, if you will, considering the global economy and everything that is going on. And, everything is starting to trend down. This is actually a study I wasn't familiar with before. It's a really interesting read, and we would like to keep an eye on this one going forward for sure. And for our last article, AWS has an announcement, and they announced Bottle Rocket, a new open source Linux-based operating system purpose-built for containers. Now, I don't think this is a revelation to anyone in our industry, and it was probably just a next step for them to continue their customer focus and to continue to reduce friction. This one, there's nothing super magical about this. Just about everyone at this point has a stripped down, purpose-built OS. But the idea here being, of course, works with EKS, ECS coming soon, and the ability to just download an AMI. It's already built into the ecosystem, and get up and running that much quicker and with that much less hassle just in general within the Amazon ecosystem. There will be a lot of people out there that will certainly look forward to this in the near future. And with that, we're going to move on to our main episode. A quick note on this. We actually recorded, Ken and I recorded this episode probably 5 or 6 days ago, and you can already tell based off of the world economy and things that are going on around the coronavirus and working from home, even some things that we mention in here are slightly out of date. So everyone, keep track of the news and everything that's going on. But this is an interesting topic, and we felt like a timely topic to kind of take a step back from tech this week and just focus on working from home and keeping people productive. And with that, on to the show.
Today's Cloudcast is sponsored by Datadog, a cloud-scale monitoring service that provides comprehensive visibility into cloud, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments with over 350 integrations. Datadog unifies your metrics, logs, and distributed request traces in one platform so that you can investigate and troubleshoot issues across every layer of your stack. Use Datadog's rich, customizable dashboards and algorithmic alerts to ensure redundancy across multi-cloud deployments and monitor cloud migrations in real time. Try Datadog for yourself with a free trial, and you receive a complimentary t-shirt. That 14-day trial can be found just by going to datadog.com/cloudcast. That's datadog.com/cloudcast.
And we're back. It's just Aaron this week, and actually something slightly different. We don't have a tech topic this week. With everything going on in the world, we're going to talk a bit today about working remotely. This concept may be new and maybe a little unexpected to some of you, and maybe it's your first time doing this. And so we wanted to talk about this a little bit today. I've invited past guest and occasional co-host Ken Hui onto the show. Between Ken and I, we have worked together at a few different places now, and we probably have probably going to really age us 20 plus years working from just about anywhere. So welcome back, Ken. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me back on. It's been a while.
Yeah. And for those that maybe live under a rock and don't know, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you're up to these days.
Sure. So I've been in the IT industry for a better part of 2 decades and worked at a lot of different places from on the end user side and also on the vendor side. And I think I actually got involved with the Cloudcast because of my one of my stints was at Rackspace as the OpenStack evangelist. And I think that's how I got involved in hosting and also being a guest on some of those shows you did around OpenStack summits.
Yep. And you and I, we did a show together at the OpenStack Summit in Hong Kong. So you can say you're a guest on the most remote of the Cloudcast episodes. That's probably the furthest we were away from the Raleigh offices, right?
That is true.
So let's start off with like, okay, so there's some folks out there that are probably working from home, and it might be their first time doing it, and they're kind of adjusting a little bit. And you and I both have, some tips and tricks to share that have made people successful, but maybe let's start off with the flip side of that. What's a little bit of some lessons learned, if you will, in some of your jobs?
Sure. So I think what I'm seeing even now with, everything happening with the coronavirus and people talking about working from home is this seems to be, and I think is a tech thing, right? Everybody wants to talk about tools. Like, should I use Zoom? Should I use Chime? Should I use WebEx? And I think the challenge is actually not the tools these days. I think the challenge is actually, as always, is people and process. So I kind of got firsthand on that when I first started working from home on a regular basis was probably around 2013. And I distinctly remember trying to get some work done and having my wife ask me, well, since you're actually not really working and you're home, can you help? Can you run this errand for me when you're not on a call? And that happened frequently enough that I realized what I should have done is to sat down with my family and just outline some basic rules around when dad or when I'm working at home, I am working. With the emphasis on the working and not so much on the home piece. And I found after I started doing that and kind of drafting it's in essence drafting up some guidelines that that really help ease everything. But before that, it was a constant battle of me trying to say, actually, I'm working and I really can't run out to the grocery store at this moment.
Yeah, it makes sense. It is a little bit of like have a start and stop time, have a a little bit of a dedicated workspace. And I'm that way too. I've my wife does real estate as a business, and so we've moved a number of times over the years. And a number of houses ago, we started to add remote office, for me. Into the house requirements, if you will. So, I completely admit I already have that space, and some folks may not. And if they don't, then they probably need to come up with some kind of dedicated space where you can close the door and here's when I'm working and here's when I'm not working, right? Try and maintain some kind of clock. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, and I've lived in New York pretty much my whole life. So I've had spaces where basically my private space was I took one of those what do you call those Japanese kind of partitions, like bamboo.
Yes.
And just set it up just to create not so much to help me from distraction, but to help let people in my family know, okay, the partitions are up, therefore he's in the office working.
Very good. That's great advice. Now, once we got the home thing set up and we've got some rules in place, let's kind of start with some of the basics, right? What are some first things, no matter which tool you're using, what are some first steps to kind of keep your sanity and really start to be productive? I kind of listed out a number in the show notes here, but what kind of jumps first and foremost to your mind? Yeah,
for me, it is having set working hours. And that especially is the case if your work doesn't revolve around meetings. Like some of us sometimes have work as meetings throughout the day, then in that case, it sort of defines what your working hours are. But if you say you're a developer and you do a lot of development work alone, it's very easy to fall into the habit of, I'll just get up when I get up and work when I work. And I find that it's hard to build a good routine that way. So I always tell people, even if you're working from home, define a time that you're actually going to, quote unquote, go into your home office, and then a time that you're going to end, and stick to that so that, again, you're building a routine that you can follow.
And I'll add a couple others as well that you and I, as I mentioned before, we've worked together at least 2 times in our careers at the same company. And some things here, I will say this, for better or worse, people assume the worst. And what I mean by that is if your calendar isn't public, it's either not shared or all of your events are marked as private, or you're, like somebody tries and get hold of you during business hours and they don't immediately get hold of you, they will assume the worst, meaning they will assume you're sitting on the sofa in your bunny slippers, watching Netflix and not working. And I definitely have experienced this in the past. And so, a couple practical tips here is, make sure your calendar is there and it's open to the public and it stays up to date. Make sure this is something, it maybe if your company doesn't already have it, they certainly should very, very soon. And I know you and I have hit this one personally. Have some kind of standard. If somebody's remote and has to get hold of somebody, do they use Slack? Do they use Google Hangouts? Do they text each other? Like, what is the back channel way to instantly communicate? What's the equivalent of walking down the hall and checking on someone's, desk, right? And trying to have those quick conversations. You have to enable that kind of communications path. That one, I think, is probably the single biggest killer. I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that really, and that's, I think, part of a whole big subject of, you have to recognize if you're used to working in an office environment and now you're working at home from home, communication becomes that much more difficult, and therefore you have to put that much more thought and effort into how am I going to communicate with people. Kind of like you said, you got to have your calendar be open. You got to over communicate, but maybe keep your boss much more updated over email than you might normally do if you're both working in the office at the same time. So
agreed.
And the Slack thing, right? Even though a lot of people hate Slack, I it's always good to just even have casual chats and check in with your teammates, just to have some social element and to let them know, that you're online and available.
Agreed. And I'm not going to step on my soapbox of Slack and Slack being a replacement for email. Anybody who's seen my Twitter recently, Slack has a purpose. Email has a purpose. Keep the tools in their swim lanes. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Another one is simple too. Again, doesn't matter on the tool. At the most previous time that we worked together, you in particular were earlier than I, and you were part of marketing, and most of marketing was at HQ, and you and some others were remote, and you pushed really, really hard for, I'll just call them home inclusion rules. And,
right.
If everyone's working from home, maybe where I'm going with this is more of like it's best practices and best etiquette of, meeting requests and setting up your tools and camera on, camera off. Like, tell everyone a little bit about your thoughts and some of the things that you implemented, which I actually thought were really fantastic.
Yeah, I think in an environment like that, it's slightly different, right? Because in this case, we might be having everyone working remotely,
right,
as opposed to just one person. But I think the point is communication. The big one is having video. I know that the temptation is always for people to only be in audio, so they can be kind of working on other things, or in some cases, people just don't like to have people. They don't like the way they look on video. But I always remember when I took some communication classes in school, and they said 80% of communication is actually nonverbal. So if that is the case, then you actually want to be seen, so people can see your facial expressions and make sure that you're sort of virtually making eye contact. And so I've always pushed very hard in every job I had that when you do calls, especially these days, do it as a video call, and kind of you can especially do this now in Chime and in Zoom. Just have have windows open where you can see other people who are on the call at the same time. And I think if you do that, you'll find communication flows a little better, and maybe even more importantly, you get a little more of the nuances when somebody says something, because you can actually see their facial expression and kind of how they're saying something.
And I'll add a little bit more to it as well. And again, this is all about impressions, right? And it's all about assumptions as well. And I'll add another one to that as well. In addition to have a start time and a stop time, get up, take a shower, and be on video after you've taken a shower. Treat it like, you'd be amazed at the number of people who, when they're working from home, you don't want to put them on camera, right? You want to be presentable. Because again, people will assume the worst. So that's definitely something I've seen as well. The one I was going to add to that as well is, okay, we're talking about how everyone, simulates kind of walking down the hall and tapping somebody on the shoulder. We talked about, with video on, how it's kind of simulating a face-to-face meeting. The other big one I would say as well is some kind of reporting mechanism, whether, can be a Kanban board, can be, I don't know, like it's something in Trello, can be an email, can be something over Slack. But going back to this topic earlier that you talked about of over communication is key when working remotely. You have to make an effort to not be out of sight, out of mind. And so something I've found that has been successful for me over the years is this concept of a weekly report. I kind of have a distributed team. Like everyone has stakeholders. Everyone has, somebody who, even if they're not direct reports, they're all the core people you work with. Well, great. Make a report, not that long. You want to keep it short so they'll actually read it. Don't make it an email attachment because they'll never open it. Just make it, hey, here's the things I did this week. Here's my priorities for next week. here's like green, yellow, red status, if you will, if you want to even go that far, or like, here's the things that need escalation, or here's the things that I definitely need to call out. Something as simple as, if you have any upcoming PTO or anything like that. If we're all working from home and we're all kind of stuck at home, you don't have to include upcoming travel or anything like that. But it just gives everyone a weekly touch base. They kind of glance at it. They're probably not going to read every line, in depth, but they're going to look at it and kind of go, yep, okay, I see what he's doing. I get this. Ooh, I have a question on that. I'll ask him about that. Uh-huh. And it's a good way to quickly and easily keep everyone in sync without having to do a weekly status meeting and everyone, I call them show up and throw ups, right? Like everyone takes their turn and does their readout for 10 minutes and no one listens and everyone checks email. So I found that to be an effective tip.
Yeah. And I think along those lines, I think that obviously the weekly email is just a good staple in terms of communication. I've also, in our previous job together, used a Trello. It's basically using it as a Kanban board.
Yep. And
that's a great way if you have the type of team where you kind of need to know what everyone's doing, because maybe there's some dependencies. For example, in tech marketing, we often relied on people reviewing the work we did, and you want to kind of know what the status is. So having a Kanban board, or whether it's in Trello or something else, kind of helps keep everybody informed. So they can always just look on the board and know, okay, this is the status of that white paper I'm working on, or that blog post put together.
Yep. Any other tips or tricks you can think of off the top of your head?
Yeah, so a couple of things, a couple of areas. One is, interestingly, I've been getting actually a lot of questions from people back here in New York who are kind of working from home for the first time, and they know I've worked from home for like I said, better part of 7 years now, and they so two things that often come up is, one is they go, how do I keep from being distracted? How do I
sure
how do I not like you said, avoid watching Netflix, or not even that, but just like feeling like every few minutes they want to get up and go to the fridge or go get a snack. And the biggest issue there being obviously that when you do that, there's so much context switching that has to go on. You're basically making yourself less productive. So that's one thing. And then, and I'll get back to that. And then the second thing is people want to know, how do I, what if I'm someone who's pretty social and now all of a sudden I can't just tap someone on the shoulder and have a conversation about something. And some people then find that it's really hard for them to focus it working from home because they need that social type of thing. So back to the first one. I had a friend who exactly told me that. They were like, I just started working from home for the first time last week. She was telling me for the first time last week, and she was so unproductive because she kept like just fussing around doing little things like straightening out the cabinet or hunting for snacks. Or my advice to her was, if home is a distraction, and then go move somewhere else. And I know this can be different for different people. So it happens that in my neighborhood, a lot of I live in an apartment building, so does my friend, and they have these buildings have loungers that not many people use. And my advice was, go to the lounge, because now it feels like you're going to work.
Yes,
because you're getting out of the house. And two, now you're not in a place where there's all these distractions of being home, and just use that time so that you don't have to do the context switching. And I do that frequently when I'm working from home, where during the afternoon I'll go, okay, I'm just going to go down to the lounge now and work for the rest of the afternoon.
That's good.
I find that's helpful.
Yep.
So there may be other things you can do if you're. Well, I think that kind of fits into the whole, like a whole set of things you could do if you're the type of person who can get distracted working from home, but respond well to saying, I have deadlines. Then basically, I think what you're saying is create some deadlines for yourself.
Yes.
Every single day. So that serves that dual purpose of communicating out what you have to do, what you're doing with people, but it also, I think, will help you focus, because if at the end of the day, you have to get three things done, then you're less likely to get distracted and more likely to say or to block your time. Say, I have to get these 3 things done by the end of the day. And I think the other thing is about the social aspect. I think that's obviously going to be much trickier now because it's not like you can just go in to like I'm not sure I would tell people now, okay, now walk into a Starbucks.
Right.
So you can be around people, because we may very well get to points in where officials tell us you should all just stay home and away from and not gather in public places. So I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but one of the things that I know a friend of ours, Matt Brenda, has done, or Matt Broberg, sorry, has done in the past, is that I'd love to see people try. Is he's every so often he'll get a bunch of his cohorts, people he knows, to kind of jump on like a Zoom, and it's just an all-day Zoom that's running maybe on a separate screen or an iPad or something like that, and people are just working, but then you're almost virtually creating an office environment where if you need to, you just tap someone and you can have a quick chat, maybe ask a question about something you're working on.
I like that.
So I think that would be an interesting idea to try. I haven't heard of anyone actually trying it on a regular basis, but that would be an interesting thing I like to see. I like to hear about one of your listeners try.
Yeah.
With their team.
Fantastic. Very cool. Those are the big things for me. Ken, anything else before we let you go?
I think people need to be patient on themselves, because it took me, I don't know about you, Aaron, but it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I kind of learned how to be productive, as productive as I could working from home. And so if someone's never done it or have seldom done it, it may take them a little while to get used to it. And I would just tell people, don't get discouraged. Just try things. And I think the things we suggested are things that we've seen work for us and maybe for other people, but maybe works for someone else. So an example is, I've heard people, sometimes I'll tell people, they tell me they need to be in a very quiet environment. So maybe they have to like go into a closet just to shut out all the noise from home. But I have a different temperament. I actually focus better the more noisy it is.
Oh, wow.
So I actually, I think because I grew up in a big family.
Okay.
So I actually find that when it's too quiet, I can't actually concentrate. But if I hear noise in the background, I can actually focus. So I'll actually have music on. I might not, obviously I'm not watching TV, but I'll have music on in the background just because that background noise helps me focus.
Huh. And that's so interesting because, here I am. I'm an only child and I've got noise canceling headphones for at home.
Right. Yeah. But I think the point is people need to
everyone's
take
different.
Some of the suggestions. Yeah. They need to take some of the suggestions we've made on this episode and maybe what they've read elsewhere and say, well, I need to adjust it, right, according to what I need. And I think that gets back to if you set goals for yourself every day for things I'm going to accomplish, kind of focus on that and say, what do I need to do to make sure that I accomplish the goals I want, whatever my setup might look like.
Yeah. Get the basics, get a basic workspace down, figure out how you're going to communicate with everyone, and then set up your goals and knock them down on a daily basis. It's no different than working in the office in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You just, you just don't have a commute anymore, or it's a lot shorter. So,
absolutely.
All right. And with that, Ken, where can everyone find out more about you? I don't know that you'll necessarily be out and about at events coming up, but if everyone wanted to follow you online or anything else, where can they follow you?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Ken Hui NY. So KenHuiNY. I tweet every day, frequently. I'm now a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services. So one of the things I've been doing since I joined up in January is I kind of tweet out like little AWS good to knows, stuff that you may not easily find in the documentation. I put them into a tweet just so to help people kind of think, some tips and things that I think people would be good for people to know when they're working with AWS.
Yep.
So you can follow me there, and always my DM is. I always tell people my DM is open. So if folks have questions about working from home or about anything else, I'm happy to help any way I can.
Fantastic. All right, Ken, thank you very much for your time this week. And on behalf of Brian, who wasn't able to make it this week, thank you everyone for listening. And we'll talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.